Welcome to Quick Takes with Kevin, a weekly podcast about leadership, life, and ministry with Kevin Ezel, president of the North American Mission Board. Each week, Kevin will be focusing on how pastors can keep their souls healthy in the midst of the demands and challenges of everyday life. Now, here's your host, Kevin Ezel.
Hey, pastors, Kevin Ezel from the North American Mission Board. Here today with my good friend Andy Addis, who's pastor of CrossPoint Church in Hutchinson, Kansas.
That's right.
And Andy, we've been going through a book called Replenish, and in chapter 8 it talks about the isolation trap. And you've seen your church grow considerably. And often when you have more and more and more responsibility, people tend to stiff arm, become almost more isolated personally. Has that been your experience, or do you still are able to hang out with as many people as you've always been able to hang out with?
The answer is no. Yeah, there's obviously a change and a transition. I take some solace in reading the Gospels where it's always Jesus with Peter, James, and John. You know, every time he did something, it was Peter, James, and John.
Right.
And I'm sure the other disciples, when they went up on the Mount of Transfiguration, were like, Peter, James, and John, Peter, James, and John.
Right.
You know, why are we doing firewood? And they're off with him. There are crowds. There is a certain capacity. There is a real relational level where you have to have friendships. You have to have relationships. And no, you can't relate to everybody the same.
Well, tell me, when you started CrossPoint, I know it was really, you started with how many? Just tell me.
127 people.
That's right. And so today you have at least 12 campuses, I know, and you run total worship, how many?
On average, depending on whether it's harvest season or not, because we're very rural, we're usually over 3,000, but we know we're reaching about 4,800 on a regular basis.
Right. Well, where I was going with that is when you pastor a church of 120, then you go to 4,200. You're the people who can hold you accountable. Sometimes that diminishes as your platform increases, and
right.
So we just want to share now. Who can speak into your life, push back a bit, besides your spouse?
I absolutely. You know, there's a certain amount of the people that you work with that you want to be able to speak into your life. And I have an executive team that I work with that they have the right to say whatever they need to say, and we need to have great casual conversation. But I also have a couple of men. Can I tell a story or two here? Glenn Davis, who is a director of missions, Heart of Kansas Association. I went to him when he was pastoring and said, "Hey, you're way down the road from me. Help me out." And I remember one day that we were sitting there and I was bemoaning the building program and some costs and this and that. He just sat there and lovingly listened. And I remember he just went, "Huh." I said, "What's that huh for, Glenn?" He goes, "I'm just wondering when the Lord let you down so much that you stopped trusting him." And he just undercut. I'm like, "What are you saying?" He goes, "Because it sounds to me like he's failed you miserably. Tell me about that story. I'd like to know when."
Yeah.
And it just brought me back to center. I mean, he was that guy. He had the right to speak to me, and he had gone down that road, and I'd given him permission to look into my life, and so he could say those hard things.
Sure.
And then I've got another buddy. His name is Chuck Stecker, and he's the president of a Chosen Generation Ministry. He's a retired Pentagon official, so he's man's man. We flew into Denver once, my wife and I, and he and his wife Billy picked us up, and after he patted me on the back, gave me a big hug, we sat down in the front seat. He asked me how things were going on and encouraged me, and then he goes, "I need to talk to you about this Twitter thing." I said, "Okay." He goes, "You need to quit talking like a girl if you want to lead men." And you could have heard a pin drop in that car. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And the first thing I want to do is, "Listen, old man, I don't need to take this from you." But I thought about it, and he was right. I was acting juvenile, and so as examples of as we've grown, everybody wants to speak into your life. Everybody has a wonderful plan for your life.
Right.
But given permission to some guys to say the hard things, and it's because you've given the relational time, because you've given the access, that you have to be willing to take the good and the bad.
Right. You know, I think some guys who start off and things go really well, I can see both sides. Man, it is not good leadership-wise if you don't have someone constantly pouring into you. Then you're going to create such a vacuum that even in a successful time, you can make some really bad decisions if you're just living in a cocoon.
Well, especially the more success you have, the greater the numbers, if that's your best definition of success. There's been something they've been talking about in the media lately, which is the echo chamber.
Right.
And you can create your own
Yeah.
minor echo chamber in your life with people who just want to say yes and just want access and just want to be involved in what's going on, and that is not healthy.
Right. Well, listen, you've created an incredibly healthy environment, and I pray it continues to be that way. And a lot of it's because you allow people to speak into your life. So, hey, thanks.
so.
One, thank you for the example, the model you are, and how you're multiplying yourself in such creative ways. And pray that isolation trap is not one you fall into.
Amen and amen.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us for Quick Takes with Kevin. Each week, Kevin will visit with pastors and leaders as they talk about the challenges they face and the lessons they've learned in balancing faith, family, and ministry. Thank you for being with us.